I'm so grateful that you're both alive, but I'm also sad that my kids didn't survive. I would give anything to be able to go and hold them and tell them that I love them and be a part of their life.
Melissa Oden, thanks so much for joining.
Thank you for having me.
Can you share your experience with abortion?
My experience is one that our culture tries to silence and even shame. I am one of those babies who survived my own abortion. My birth mother was a 19-year-old college student back in 1977 when she was forced to undergo a saline infusion abortion. During that procedure, I soaked in the toxic salt solution of it for 5 days. We know that through my medical records, it lasted longer than what it was intended to. I now know during those 5 days, they started to suspect my birth mom might lose her life as well. Another inconvenient truth about abortion. And I am so grateful that even though I was poisoned and scalded over that 5-day period, on the final 5th day, when they successfully induced her labor, instead of being expelled from the womb as a successful abortion, as our world would call it, I was accidentally born alive.
How old were you when that abortion was attempted on your life?
My medical records state that the abortionist thought my birth mom was between 18 and 20 weeks pregnant, but when I was ultimately whisked off to the NICU, a neonatologist remarked I looked like I was about 31 weeks.
Do you have any injuries from enduring 5 days of saline solution as a preborn baby?
When I was rushed to the NICU, I weighed a little less than 3 pounds. I was 2 pounds, 14 ounces. I suffered from severe respiratory and liver problems. I was suffering from seizures for an extended period of time. Now that I look at my medical records, I now know they thought I had a fatal heart defect initially because I presented with so much distress, and understandably so after soaking in this solution for 5 days. They were very guarded about what my future might hold, but still today, I am quote unquote healthy. Most of my injuries would be emotional, mental, spiritual. Certainly living in the culture that we do takes those wounds and keeps bringing them to the forefront. And that's normal for so many survivors that I know.
What happened after your birth? Were you adopted? Did your birth mother raise you?
I'm sort of the poster child of what most people think a born alive infant is, born in the final step of my own abortion procedure, and that is indeed who many of us are. But there are lots of survivors who are just a continuing pregnancy that we don't even know about. A woman will carry an abortion survivor for weeks or sometimes months before that child is born. In my circumstances, I was placed for adoption. You know, my story is very unique in many ways because I now know my birth mother did not know that I had survived her abortion for over 30 years.
They never told your own birth mother that you were alive?
The day that they induced her labor, they told her it had been successful. They said, it's hideous, it's a monster, don't look at it. She didn't know if I was a little boy or a little girl. Her family knew that the abortion had failed, and I will probably never know how I ultimately was placed for adoption, but what I do know is that my mom and dad first met me when I was still lying in an incubator full of tubes and wires fighting for my life, and my mom and dad loved me into life.
Was that legal, do you know, for them to have an abortion surviving infant that is the biological child of the woman and not even tell her that the child will be adopted out?
What's fascinating is that there is a signature on the adoption paperwork that is not my birth mother's signature. Wow. So there's a lot to unpack there. And certainly from a family standpoint, there were a lot of secrets. My maternal grandmother was a prominent nurse. That's how this secret forced abortion took place, bypassing hospital regulations and procedures. But I can tell you, Lila, that I hear from women all the time who have similar stories, and women who will reach out and say, can you help me find out if my child survived my abortion?
You mentioned emotional, spiritual, I think mental injuries. Can you share more about that and what you've experienced?
I found out my story when I was 14 by a complete and utter accident, and every survivor finds out their story in a different way in a different time. It's never easy. But that's part of, I think, the redemptive work that I get to do with the Abortion Survivors Network is we support biological parents who raise their survivor. We support adoptive parents because we don't have to struggle in silence with hard stories. It's healing and it's empowering not just for the survivor, but for everybody impacted when we talk about it. So for me, I think a lot of my pain came from the fact that back then, we didn't talk about the fact that babies survived abortions. There was really nobody out there besides Gianna Jessen that I first knew about. But it took me about 5 years in my healing before I ever found out there was someone else like me. And I can tell you that there is nothing more beautiful for me right now than to be sent pictures of young abortion survivors, and they're watching us on TV, and they get to see people like them for the first time. So for me, that brings incredible healing to myself, and that's how we shift what's happened in our culture. But for me, it was a place of incredible shame to find out that I was an abortion survivor.
Why?
Because of what our culture says about abortion, that it's someone else's choice, it's someone else's right. And if that is talked about as such, what does that mean for those of us that survive? We were someone else's choice, we were someone else's right. Our death was someone else's right. And when we live in a culture that then heaps more shame by saying, you know what, abortion survivors don't exist. You guys just wanted to be famous. You are these Republican-made figments to attack women's reproductive rights. It bears on your identity time and time again.
Did you feel shame for being alive?
Such guilt. The guilt of, why me and not them?
Them?
Them, the tens of millions of children who didn't survive. And even from the standpoint of being healthy, why? I mean, it's a blessing, right? It's this double-edged sword. I'm so grateful. I would not change who I am. But at the end of the day, it's really hard to separate the two. My greatest joy is my greatest pain.
Did you feel rejection from your mother, your birth mother?
I felt it inside. My relationship with my biological family now is so incredibly beautiful. My birth mom is a huge part of my life. But I think what we need to recognize, and research tells us this, that babies in the womb experience the stress that their mothers go through. So we think about women like my birth mom who go through the stress of crisis and then abortion. And so I felt that stress. Then I go through the stress of being poisoned and scalded. Then I go through the stress of a stay in the NICU, right? I had all this stress. And so it essentially rewires me in many ways. And again, I know this about myself, so I get to use it for good. But it is this deep-seated fight or flight that was turned on. And again, I see this in survivors, but it's also this piece of us that knows inherently that something so terrible happened to us. And so that's really part of our healing process, is recognizing how that impacts us physically and emotionally and mentally and spiritually, so that as we heal, we can be as whole as we ever will be and deal with that rejection that still will always be this little tiny piece of me.
What did it feel like when you first felt that rejection? You discovered as a young teen, that an abortion had been attempted on your life.
Like a bomb went off. I was raised to know I was adopted. You know, I can't tell you when I first found out my story. My mom and dad just did an amazing job of helping my older sister, who's also adopted, you know, helping us know that adoption was a blessing to them and to us, and that our birth parents loved us. This wasn't a case of not being loved. They simply couldn't care for us. And so when I found out that they had attempted that abortion, it felt like everything I had been told about my life wasn't true. And that is to no fault of my parents. They were doing the best they could with what they had. And so to find out that truth, yeah, it was like every piece of me, everything I ever knew about myself was gone, and I stood on this shaky ground, and I was so afraid of anybody knowing my story. I told a handful of people that I could trust, but it didn't take long for me to go away to college and receive just that message that my story was not welcome. And when you tell an abortion survivor, either explicitly or implicitly, that their story is not welcome, what you're communicating is they are not welcome. And so that's where that rejection comes in, when we are such a dreaded complication to the abortion industry, and then our culture receives that message, and the media has accepted that lie. Survivors can't even scroll social media, turn on the news, and not face this kind of information. Think about our youngest survivors. I mean, we have 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds, 18-year-olds, even younger, right? All across the continuum. What kind of message are these children receiving? Not just about abortion, but about who they are. To me, that's such an injustice.
Claire, you also survived an abortion attempt. And how does it feel hearing from another survivor about their story?
I mean, I think it's comforting. You know, it feels like family. I mean, Melissa and I have met before, and we've shared our stories before. But like Melissa, when I found out I survived my birth mother's D&E abortion, I went on the internet and I looked it up. Like, there are other survivors, and there were two. There was Gianna and another survivor named Sarah, which I don't really know what happened to her, but she had survived an abortion as well. And I went home and was trying to process, like, what does this mean for me? And meeting Melissa and other survivors was so healing for me, just to know that I'm not alone and I'm not this person with this story that nobody else has. I have somebody to process it with and to relate to.
How many abortion survivors have you both met now?
We were just talking about that. For me, because of the work that I do, I mean hundreds. And to me, that is always one of the most exciting things, to meet other survivors. And that moment where a survivor looks at another survivor for the first time, there is nothing like it in the world. Because so many of our survivors, you know, they can be in their 60s, their 70s before they meet another person like themselves. And to know how that transforms them.
Yeah. I'll never forget, I was in Oregon sharing my testimony. Actually, another survivor, Josiah Presley, and I were sharing our testimonies, and two people in the audience came up to us and said, I too survived my birth mother's abortion, and thank you so much for sharing your story, because for them it was so freeing to hear, and now they are as well sharing their story, and they've connected with the Abortion Survivors Network. And so it's been really neat and eye-opening, because for so long we thought there was just 3 or 4 of us, and the reality is there are hundreds and thousands that we don't even know about.
Tens of thousands.
Yeah.
We've gotten to hear from you, Emily, and from you, Gigi, some of your story. Patricia, I'd love to hear a little more of your story and share it so that Gigi and Emily can hear it too, about your experience with abortion.
I decided to have 3 abortions. I was 19 years old, found myself 3 unwanted pregnancies, and I was told when I was in the 6th grade that abortion was a woman's right, and it was a solution to this problem. And I was lied to before my 3 abortions. They would never let me look at the screen. They told me it was just a clump of cells, sac of tissue. And after each abortion, I was sent home, and they said I would have cramping and bleeding. That was basically it. No post-care follow-up appointment, none of that. But they never told me about post-abortion syndrome. And after each abortion, I would have mental issues, disorders, emotional. I mean, I was anorexic at one point. I would have nightmares. If I were to see children in public, it would traumatize me. I had so much shame, even though society tells you that abortion's legal, it's your right, it's your body, it's your choice. I just felt so much shame. I would have emotional roller coasters. I'd be angry all the time. I'd have crying bouts. I'd be frustrated, severe depression. I was pretty much suicidal as well, too, by the time I had the 3rd abortion. And my partner was experiencing the same symptoms. He would have nightmares. He couldn't look at children in public. He was very depressed. He started drinking, even started doing drugs. So we were both suffering post-abortion syndrome. And I just didn't connect the emotions or the mental disorders with the abortions. And I was still pretty much pro-choice. and for women's rights. And I applied for a job at Planned Parenthood as a receptionist, but they gave me the job as a back office nurse illegally because they urgently needed my Spanish. Most abortion patients were African American and Latinas, and they had never had anybody speak Spanish. There was a language barrier, which is really unsafe now thinking about it. And it was when I had to assist the abortionist for the first time that I saw the reality, the cruel reality of abortion. I was trained to change my vocabulary, never to use the word mother, father, he, she, or the word baby, the word fetus. If a woman was crying, I would have to ignore her tears, never be compassionate, never be friendly to the patient. And in other jobs that I had previously in the medical field, I was always trained, patient care number one, be compassionate, be friendly, but this was completely different. I was never to bring a photograph of a family or my family, my nephews, my cousins, because if a woman walks into the abortion clinic and sees a picture of a family, she would then be, traumatized and run out, and we would lose that abortion. I was told that time was money. Basically, that each abortion had to last about 5 minutes because we got to get all these girls in. I was really surprised at the ages of these young girls that were having abortions during the week. They were supposed to be in school. There were about 13, 14, 15-year-old girls, 30 patients, 40 patients at a time. We would bring them in. It was to see the truth and to assist the abortionist and to look for the baby body parts was horrifying. It was a true Holocaust. Women would cry, kick, scream. I remember women fainting, and we would just drag them into the post-care room, and give them tea and cookies. Some women would hemorrhage. We would just put gauze, to stop the hemorrhaging and to send them home like that. We'd never call an ambulance. And I realized after working there, they never cared about women. They didn't care about children. They didn't care about the youth. And it was all a blood money market. And not only did I suffer post-abortion syndrome, and I still do, I still suffer that. I still have symptoms, especially when I became a mom again. While I was pregnant, I would think to myself, how come I want this baby now and I killed 3 other, right? I would have these guilty feelings. But I even suffered as a worker in the back. I was even deceived and lied to when I was given the job. I seriously did not know I was gonna look for baby body parts.
Emily and Gigi, both of you shared recently about your abortion experiences. So that we can all just know our different experiences, can you share each how many abortions you had? And then it sounds like all 3 of you have kids now.
I got pregnant at 17 at the end of my senior year of high school and had an abortion, and it was a chemical or medical abortion using RU-486 drugs. And 7 months later, I got pregnant again as a freshman in college and had another abortion. And thankfully now I have 3 kids. Hudson is 9, Logan is 7, and Evie is 5. And they are the light of my life, and I thank God for them every single day.
Sorry, guys. Hold on. All right. So I had 5 abortions. And 4 of them were the surgical, what they call the surgical in the office, where they suction out, vacuum out the child. And 1 was the abortion pill, where you do it at home in your own shower. And, but I actually had a dream, and I never shared this before anywhere. But I actually had a dream while going through a post-abortion program that I was pregnant in this dream. I was like in heaven or in this big field, and my belly was huge. And I kept seeing these little hands pushing through from the inside of my belly. And I counted the hands, and there were 8 different babies. And so somewhere in my pregnancy, I had multiples. So if you can do the math, I lost 8 babies, but I had 5 abortions.
When you all hear from Melissa and Claire their stories of abortion, what does it make you feel?
Sad, but also happy. I'm so grateful that you're both alive, but I'm also sad that my kids didn't survive. I would give anything to be able to go and hold them and tell them that I love them and be a part of their life. So there is just a level of sadness that my children did not survive, but I'm so thankful that you're here and that you're using your story for good, and it needs to be heard. People need to hear this. They need to look you in your eyes and see that your lives are so valuable and that you are precious and worthy.
I just want to say I'm sorry because I was part of the abortion industry. You know, I held those babies that were aborted in my hands. I had blood stained on my hands. And forgiving myself for that was even harder than my own abortions, because I know that I was deceived and lied to, but I saw truth. And I saw the anguish in those babies' faces. I could see their expression. And that for me has been the hardest part to heal. So I just want to say I'm really sorry.
Thank you. Melissa and Claire, what do you feel hearing the stories from Gigi and from Emily and from Patricia?
You know, my parents said they would have adopted both me and my twin. I was a twin survivor, so I accidentally survived a D&E abortion that successfully tore my twin's body apart, similar to the ones you pieced back together. And so I'm just imagining what you had to experience in that room, seeing the humanity of the baby, somebody like my twin. And I'd love to hear, did you see that baby while you were doing that? Did you see their humanity?
I did, immediately. I immediately recognized this is not a sack of tissue. This is all a lie. This is a deception, and it's a baby. And I was horrified. And I was only there for very little time. And I ran out of Planned Parenthood and never looked back. But just to know that I had killed my own 3 children without knowing, that was pretty painful, but I did get to see all the little children in pieces and in garbage cans.
The one thing I've been thinking of as all of you spoke is, first of all, your courage. Because I think there's sometimes this belief that as survivors, we're the courageous ones. And any of us who have been impacted by abortion and go through healing and choose to share that story are courageous no matter what our experience is. So first of all, your courage strikes me. But I think the other thing too is that no matter our abortion experience, whether it was working in the clinic or having experienced an abortion or surviving one, we're all so much more alike than we are different.
I agree, and I think, you know, just like Melissa has connected so many abortion survivors and helped them find healing, I truly believe that your courage is going to help other women find healing in their past abortions or their past experience in the abortion industry. And that's what it's going to take to change the culture that we're living in, because so many people are just desperate to know that there are other options or there are other jobs and they are worthy and capable of that. And so I think that your courage is going to help a lot of women and men and families.
Did any of you two struggle with forgiving your birth mother?
I didn't. Obviously I have a lot of questions. I have asked God a lot of questions over the years, like why did this happen? Like Melissa, why me? Why not my twin? Why was my twin dismembered in the womb next to me? Why did I get to miraculously survive? But I was raised in a great home, and my parents laid a foundation for me, and they modeled forgiveness in my home, and faith was a big part of our life. And so when I met my birth mother, number one, I remembered how I was raised, and I knew that forgiveness was available to her, and I wanted to offer that to her, and I knew that it would be part of her healing, and she deserved that because she was 13 years old, and her mother was the one that took her to the abortion clinic and made the choices for her. And so even though my birth mother felt like she needed to ask for my forgiveness, I kind of didn't feel like I needed to forgive her for much. But I did meet her mother the next day, and I had to choose to forgive her too, because I realized her mother didn't have the support system that she needed to be able to go home and take care of her daughter and tell her daughter that she could do it. She was capable of motherhood and worthy of walking alongside of. And so she didn't have the resources that she needed. And then I've had to choose to forgive the abortionist too. And I have to believe that just like you, every person in that scenario truly believed they were doing the best that they could. And I think there's so many situations where I've thought I was doing the best that I could and I've messed up. And so I choose to believe the best and to choose to forgive. But it's a choice I have to make every single day.
I would say my experience is similar. Learning my birth mom's story was this slow unfolding over decades. My parents adopted me being told it was her choice. And certainly that doesn't change whether she is someone who is loved and forgiven. But what it does, I think, as you start to understand the story, is you have so much more compassion than you even thought you could. And I can say my parents loved and respected my birth mom, Ruth, all along. But now that they know the full story of how she was victimized, it just made their hearts continue to grow for her. And so my mom and dad met my birth mom for the first time just recently, even though I've had her in my life for about 11 years. And I can tell you, Ruth knows that she is so loved and she is forgiven. And like Claire said, it really is a choice. For me, there have been moments in my life where it gets hard. When I gave birth to my two daughters, and I had to look at them and know that they wouldn't have lived if that abortion would have succeeded in taking my life, right? It brought everything up from the depths of my soul. And for me, it's not ever really been about anger. It's been grief. And anger is just a part of that process, right? Of the bargaining we go through and the wrestling with everything. And I think sometimes people get stuck in that place. And that's why your courage is so striking to me, because it's working out the other side of that grief that brings us to this place of so much healing. So for me, yes, it's been an unfolding and a process. But, you know, one of the first questions my birth mom had for me when we started to even email, she said, "You can't love me the way that you say you do." And she said, "You can't forgive any of us when you now know what role my family played in it." And I can just remember where I was standing and how it took my breath away, because I was thinking, if someone wants to accuse me of something, that's the worst thing. And what it meant is that I spent years building trust and love with one another, because I wanted her to know that I see her for who she is and I love her that way.
Gigi, Patricia, or Emily, do any of you have any questions for Melissa and for Claire, or anything that you want to say to them?
For me, I am enraged about the silencing of the abortion survivor's voice. And honestly, not until this roundtable discussion have I even considered giving a voice on the women I'm talking to. My heart is for those who have had abortions to get healed and to stop having abortions, or to not even have the first. And so I just want to say sorry for just focusing on us and not even knowing or giving voice to those we have hurt the most. And so it is my new desire to now show your stories and your testimonies. I feel like it's going to be an explosion of even more saving of lives, both the mothers and the children and the fathers. because when you bring, like you said, the primary and secondary victims together and just show the connection between the two, I think it's such a powerful combination that I think I've missed out on. I don't know if you ladies have ever shared their perspective, but this is just so full circle for me. So thank you for even being willing to sit at a table with us.
I just want to thank you as well for your courage, because today I'm healing. Yeah. You know, when I pray, the only thing I could do in my imaginary is tell those little unborn children that I would help participate in taking their life. I'm sorry, but to be able to say it here personally to both of you that were unborn children that survived abortion, it's bringing me a lot of healing. So thank you so much for being here, and thank you for your courage.
I agree with both of what they've said, and I just want to say again that I'm so sorry for the things that you guys have to hear and the way that your lives have been devalued, because that is not true. And I hope and pray that you will never listen to those voices.
Knowing that my birth mom is on her own journey to healing, right? Because this is pretty new for her in the grand scheme of things to know that her child survived. I guess my question would be, what would be a recommendation or encouragement that you have for Ruth? Because that's something that you can give voice to that I can't.
That there's hope and she has purpose. There's purpose to her pain. When I was at a really low point in my life, I felt like a murderer. I felt there was no hope for my life. I just wanted to be forgiven. But the fact that I'm completely restored and that I can share my story and bring healing to others, and that there's purpose in my life, this has brought me purpose. It's just, I'm so appreciative of it, you know, but to let her know that there's hope and there's purpose for her pain.
I, like Melissa, you know, want women who have had abortions to experience forgiveness and healing. It's not just for me about talking about the baby and exposing the reality of abortions and abortion survivors. I desperately want each of you and anybody watching to experience healing and forgiveness. So on the flip side of the question that she just asked, is there something that women who have experienced like abortions like you, is there something that we can say as abortion survivors, as the aborted baby to you? Is there something that you've wanted to hear from your child for this many years that would help you? Because we meet so many women, they come up to us who have experienced abortion, and I want to be that conversation that begins their healing. So what can I say to you? What can I say to the woman who's experienced abortion as the survivor, as the aborted baby, that will jumpstart that journey for her?
Honestly, you've both already said it. The fact that you've been able to forgive your mothers is so incredibly powerful. Mm-hmm. And I think that ultimately that's what we want, is forgiveness for what we've done. And knowing that you've been capable of doing that is just incredible.
I guess to have compassion towards the women that have had abortions. When I went public on my story, the first years was very hard. I'd have had people email me and say, you're going to go to hell. You know, there's no mercy for you. You're a killer. You're a murderer. You know, during my conferences, people would stand up and, you know, give me backlash and yell at me. And it was really difficult the first years. But I feel like, you know, only between God and the woman, they know the truth and the real story behind her heart. But just to be, you know, compassionate and not non-judgmental.